The first strange thing wasn't that Violet was leaning through her open kitchen window at 3 in the afternoon, smiling down at me as if nothing had happened. It was the sound beneath the smile. Oak leaves moved above my driveway. A mower coughed 2 streets over. Inside her house, the refrigerator settled into its familiar mechanical hum. Against all of it sat a thin tremor in her voice. One hand stayed below the sill, the other rubbed the inside of her left wrist against the latch. You're staring. Salem. You're holding your breath. And you've been scraping your wrist against that latch since I crossed the yard. Her fingers stopped. The paper in her hidden hand rose enough for me to read the red heading. Notice of non-compliance. Behind her, the solid core studio door stood open, with its lower acoustic seal hanging loose. You have a paid sample due today. I said, 5 o'clock. My phone vibrated. Bennett Hughes had written, Zenith Audio Systems theater calibration is 6 hours behind. Please tell me you're coming. I turned the screen down. Violet lifted the notice. Marcus scheduled the final inspection for 2 weeks from today. Do you want me to assess the room? I asked. Only assess it. You decide what happens after. She rubbed her wrist once more, then unlocked the back door. I had lived next door for 3 years. I was 29. She was 34. In that time, I had learned the difference between her real laugh and the one she used for delivery drivers. The exact pause she took before saying she was fine. And the fact that she opened bills beside the kitchen window because the light was better there. I had also made a profession of knowing those things without admitting why. At Zenith, that habit looked like discipline. I took every late shift, checked every calculation twice, and stayed until an empty room sounded right. Bennett called it commitment when clients were listening and a personality defect when they were not. Violette had never asked me to choose her over work. That made the choice harder to disguise as obligation. The kitchen smelled of Earl Grey, old paper, and cold coffee. She usually noticed every detail. That afternoon, she had missed several. Marcus Moore was listed as chair of the HOA Architectural Committee. Her ex-husband had signed the complaint himself. The county gave the HOA 14 days to prove my studio is producing commercial noise, she said. If the room fails, my home business permit is suspended. Nora Peterson needs today's sample for the HarperCollins contract. If they move me to a commercial studio, the rent takes the mortgage money. Her thumbnail pressed into her index finger. Marcus knows that he offered to arrange a buyer for the house last month. Legally, she could not record without the permit. Financially, she could not keep the house without recording. I scanned the complaint log. Every alleged disturbance occurred during daylight, and one entry claimed amplified bass. Violette narrated fantasy novels into one condenser microphone. Unless Dragons had acquired subwoofers, the log was manufactured. Bennett texted again. I can run the sweep. You do not have to personally hold every cable in the company. I told him to start with the revised array map. He answered. That was almost delegation. I'm documenting the date. A laugh escaped Violette. Coworker? Mutiny with punctuation. The loose door seal tapped the jam. Her studio was a spare bedroom, lined with cheap foam squares and a velvet curtain. Daylight showed beneath the door. I opened my work bag and removed the calibrated sound level meter, tape, and a reference speaker. Quick repair for the sample, or full diagnosis first. Quick repair. Then the truth. Your room. Your order. 2 over-tightened screws had bowed the door seal track. I reset it, fitted a spare drop seal, and replaced the cracked elastomer in her microphone isolation mount. You carry spare parts for audiobook booths? She asked. I carry spare parts for avoidable disasters. So, people. Mostly conference centers. She read 30 seconds while I recorded a reference track. Her voice became a queen addressing a ruined city. Rich in the headphones, never loud in the room. The repaired mount removed the desk vibration, but the recording noise floor remained near minus 48 decibels fs. HarperCollins wanted roughly minus 60. The room itself measured 43 decibels. Then the refrigerator compressor started. A broad low-frequency rise appeared on the meter as vibration traveled through the floor and up the studs. "That line is my refrigerator?" she asked. "It's the structure carrying it. The foam changes reflections. It does almost nothing for transmission." Sound doesn't lie. You can't force a wave to stop. You have to give it a place to absorb. Can the room be saved? Yes, certainty arrived too fast. It was where I hid when feelings became inconvenient. But we would open the walls, add mass, decouple the finish, seal every path, and treat the floor and ventilation. If the numbers support it, do you want us to rebuild it together? Submit the sample first. Then show me every number, including cost. Agreed. I placed temporary isolation pads under the stand and sealed the door perimeter with removable gasket tape. The room dropped to 36 decibels. Her next take recorded at -61 decibels full scale. At 4:32, she sent the sample. 2 minutes later, Bennett sent a photograph of the theater console with coffee balanced where coffee should never be balanced. "Array stable," he wrote. "Your blood pressure may stand down. Move the coffee," I replied. "You really are the life of every party." Violette said, "I prevent parties from sounding terrible." Nora's reply arrived. "Sample approved. Contract slot held through inspection. Do not miss that date." Violette's shoulders lowered by an inch. One problem had closed. The larger one now had a deadline. The next morning, my truck was backed into her driveway before sunrise with mineral wool, mass-loaded vinyl, resilient channels, acoustic sealant, and 3/4-inch drywall. Violette came out in patched jeans, carrying 2 travel mugs and a checkbook. She handed me black coffee with 2 sugars, then wrote the date on a check before asking the amount. "Read this first." The Zenith agreement covered donated consulting hours and warehouse overstock. New materials were capped at $1,200, interest-free, with no payment due until her first contract installment. Any change required her signature. "And if I stop halfway?" "We stop. You keep every report and owe only for installed materials." "And this never becomes a favor you use later?" The pen dented the check below it. "It becomes paperwork we both signed. Nothing else." She read it twice, signed, and wrote $800. "I'm keeping $400 for the mortgage." "That is correct." "You're not allowed to be pleased I followed a spreadsheet." "I'm pleased the spreadsheet survived." A Zenith van arrived. Bennett climbed out with isolation clips and breakfast sandwiches. I asked for an assessment. Violette told him. He escalated. "That tracks." Bennett moved the equipment case away when I reached for it. "You assigned me the theater. I finished it. Today, you are going to let me carry my own case." Violette handed me a sandwich. An intervention with insulation. Delegation tasted like egg, cheddar, and being outnumbered. We stripped the foam, pulled the drywall, and exposed the framing. Dust settled into our hair. When one panel resisted, Violette tightened both hands on the pry bar. I did not take it. I slid a scrap block beneath the bar for leverage. "Try now." The board came free with a crack. "That was deeply satisfying," she said. "Physics usually is." By noon, the room was a skeleton. Bennett caught me relabeling cables he had already marked. "You trust me with a $4 million theater, but not 6 wall penetrations?" The bare studs carried the refrigerator hum into the room. I put down the label maker. "You're right." He blinked. I had a second paragraph. "Save it." He did not leave immediately. He handed me the theater sign-off sheet on his tablet and waited until I entered his name as responsible engineer instead of mine. "You can still answer your phone," he said. "You just cannot take the project back because silence makes you nervous." Violette returned in time to hear the last sentence. He dislikes silence? Only the kind he didn't design. Bennett said, I signed. The file left my queue and stayed gone. My hand hovered before I released it. Violette saw. Before leaving for the permit drawings, he glanced toward the kitchen. She placed those outlets within 1/8 of an inch. Don't check her work until it becomes yours. I won't. She came back with 3 sharpened pencils tucked behind one ear and a strip of blue painter's tape stuck to her sleeve. We marked every electrical box and photographed every cavity before covering it. She kept the checklist. I called measurements. When I skipped item 17, she tapped the page with her pencil until I went back. Do narrators always become this authoritarian around insulation? I asked. Only when acousticians attempt selective literacy. The work had a rhythm by then. Measure, confirm, cut, lift. When she tired, I shifted the next task lower without announcing it. When my shoulders tightened, she placed the caulk gun within reach before I asked. Neither gesture deserved a speech. That was why both mattered. Violet returned with pencils behind one ear. We packed dense mineral wool into the cavities and rolled mass-loaded vinyl across the studs. When her arms shook under the weight, I stepped behind her and pressed both hands flat against the sheet. Got it. She drove the top fasteners. As soon as the vinyl held, I stepped back and gave her room. We sealed the overlap, then sat on her living room floor with pizza between us. My back ached. Her knuckles were scraped. She slid the last mushroom slice toward me. My father would have approved of that wall, I said. He was a carpenter. He believed a good house should take care of the people inside it. What did he do when he didn't know how to fix something? Worked until he did. She folded the pizza box lid. Is that why you haven't had a weekend off in 6 months? I like finished work. That wasn't my question. Bennett finished the theater without you. I moved a napkin that did not need moving. I'm learning. She waited instead of rescuing me from the silence. My father died when I was 22, I said at last. The week after the funeral, I repaired every loose hinge in his workshop. There were 9. I remember the number better than the service. The refrigerator hummed from the kitchen. Violet started to say something, stopped, and let her hand rest on the closed pizza box. I think I kept working because finished things don't leave. I said, she did not offer a lesson or tell me to slow down. She only nudged my coffee closer before it went cold. After a while, she said, Marcus used to turn every kindness into an invoice. Dinner, rides, the down payment, everything became proof that I owed him the next decision. Her thumbnail touched her finger, then released it. That is why the agreement mattered. I know. No, you guessed. I'm telling you now. I met her eyes. Then I know now. Good. I agreed to rebuild with you, not watch you disappear into the work. The following evening, we installed resilient channels across the framing. One screw driven into the wrong place could reconnect the drywall to the studs and create a vibration bridge. I marked one wall, while Violet worked from Bennett's drawing on the other. When her drill caught a screw at an angle, she backed it out instead of forcing it. The county inspector stopped by for the permit drawings while she took Nora's call in the hall. Who laid out the east wall? He asked. Ms. Moore. Her spacing is cleaner than mine. He checked 3 points and nodded. She never heard the credit. When she returned, the approved contract was visible in her smile and the deadline in her grip on the phone. Nora holds the home studio authorization only if we pass. A calibrated meter waited beside her Earl Grey with 1 raw sugar packet. White tape on it read, room below, 32 decibels. Recording near minus 60 decibels, FS. Check fridge on-off. No signature. You left this? It belongs to the project. It appeared beside my tea. That is where the project was. She hid a smile behind the cup. For an hour, she marked script changes while I sealed penetrations. We did separate work in the same unfinished room, and the silence between us required nothing. Later. I steadied her ladder while she swept a flashlight above the window. Found a gap. A seam in the acoustic sealant was open by the width of a fingernail. I had missed it. She handed me the light. Sound doesn't lie. No, it waits for the smallest opening and embarrasses the expert. We close the seam. The next test dropped 3 decibels. Violet wrote the result on the wall schedule and drew a tiny crown beside it. When I looked at her, she shrugged. The queen from the sample survived. You are vandalizing a compliance document. I am improving morale. That night, she edited pronunciations at the desk while I installed the second drywall layer. We worked in comfortable silence, broken only by the click of her keyboard and the soft drag of my trowel. At 9:30, I set a fresh cup of Earl Grey beside her notes. She slid a folded page toward me without looking up. It contained the next day's recording windows, so I could schedule every drill and saw between them. For the first time, our plans occupied the same sheet of paper. The HVAC baffle failed 2 nights later. Our lined labyrinth box should have let air turn through absorptive chambers while sound lost energy. Instead, the first fan cycle produced an 80 Hz flutter. The room sounds like a polite helicopter. Violet said, Bennett appeared on my laptop from the theater. The baffle throat is too narrow. You increased velocity. Violette leaned toward the screen. He expected the duck to respect him. Common management error. Bennett said, a laugh came out of me before I could stop it. We widened the inlet and added a flexible connector. When I began rushing, Violet covered my tape measure with half a sandwich. You haven't eaten. It is almost 10, she added when I tried to object. We rebuilt the baffle, but a faint vibration remained. Violet walked to the refrigerator and pressed one corner. The hum changes here. A leveling foot had backed out, rocking compressor vibration into the floor. I installed dense isolation pads and leveled the appliance. The hum remained in the kitchen instead of traveling into the studio. The room settled at 31 decibels. Her test take held near minus 62 decibels FS. We did it, she said. For steady-state airborne noise. Her smile narrowed. You added a condition. Conditions keep buildings honest. The next condition arrived at 8:15 the following morning, 5 days early. A county truck stopped while Violette recorded her first contracted chapter. The inspector held a preliminary stop work order. Marcus waited on the sidewalk in a navy blazer. I remember little of the first sentence. I remember the laptop fan scraping its stand, and Violet's tea turning dark because the bag had steeped too long. I remember wanting to move the cup before it stained the agreement. The HOA alleges unpermitted structural work, the inspector said. The county also approved its request to add low-frequency impact transmission to the final test. Violet's thumbnail pressed into her index finger. Do you want to lead, or do you want me to? I asked. I lead the permit. You handle the physics. I stepped behind her. She produced the stamped permit packet. I supplied material specifications, fastener schedules, and fire rating certificates. When Marcus moved toward the porch, she stopped him. The county may inspect. The HOA receives the report. The inspector pointed to the sidewalk. Remain off the property, Mr. Moore. He showed us the approved addendum. The final test now includes a calibrated tapping machine on the primary functional surface. The floor assembly was designed before that scope existed. I said, then the stop work order stands. Violet looked at the date stamp, not at me. Section 2F grants a continuance when test scope changes after a documented filing. I request 72 hours from service, in writing, with final inspection Friday at 9. The inspector checked a receipt and the code. Then he crossed out stop work, wrote continuance, dated it, and gave her the yellow copy. Violet photographed the amended order before anyone could take it back. She emailed the image to Nora, copied the county permit desk, and wrote a 3-line confirmation of the new Friday deadline. I watched her hands remain steady through the final send. Nora called within a minute. Violet put the phone on speaker. I can protect the contract slot until Friday noon. Nora said, after that, production moves. We will have the report before then. Violette answers, not I, we. The word landed more heavily than it should have, so I concentrated on the inspector's equipment list. The tapping machine would strike in a fixed sequence across a defined load. The risers had to isolate impact energy without making the microphone platform unstable. It was not enough to make the room quiet. The solution had to remain usable. Marcus called from the sidewalk. "You're delaying the obvious." V. She closed the door. Her shoulders remained straight until the truck left. Then she set down the binder and missed the counter. I caught it. "Did you eat?" She stared at me. "That is your response?" "It is the first variable I can fix in 2 minutes." Half a banana. Her laugh broke but held. I put bread in the toaster. "Can we pass the new test?" she asked. "Yes. We build neoprene floating risers beneath the microphone platform. Bennett handles the theater file. You finish your pages and sleep. I stop work at 2 and resume at 8. She studied me. 6 hours? A structure takes care of the people inside it, she reminded me. My father's words returned with interest. 6. Bennett arrived with neoprene isolators, steel plates, and threaded rod. I gave him full sign-off authority on the theater and did not reopen the file. You earned it before today. I told him. Good. Then I'm assigning you food at 7 and sleep at 2. Violette already unionized the project. We built the risers in the garage while she recorded. The saw stayed silent whenever her red light was on. Between takes, she labeled parts and checked washers against the drawing. At 7, she set soup beside me and marked pronunciation notes at the workbench while I torqued bolts. At 11, she fell asleep upright with a pencil in her hand. I patted the bench edge beneath her arm. Finished the last riser and shut off the light at 2. 4 steel platforms waited in the dark, each separated from the frame by dense neoprene. For once, I let morning finish the job with me. At 8, I returned to find Violette already in the garage with a calibrated meter and the instruction card I had left for her. She had tested the room twice without me and logged both readings. 30.8 with the refrigerator on, she said. 29.6 at rest. You followed the sequence. I can read anonymous tape. Together we installed the risers, checked platform deflection under load, and ran a crude impact test with a weighted rubber mallet. The first corner transmitted too much energy. Violette found a washer trapped beneath one isolator, no thicker than a coin. We removed it, reset the plate, and the second reading fell below the target. The last improvement was hers. Friday arrived, cold and bright. Before opening the door, I asked, "Same plan?" Violette held the compliance binder. Her wrist was still. I handled the permit, and Marcus, you handle the room. The inspector entered with a calibrated tapping machine. Double drywall floated on resilient channels. Every seam was sealed. The microphone platform rested on 4 neoprene risers. He checked the calibration certificate on my meter against his own, inspected the fire-rated sealant, and opened the door 3 times to confirm the drop seal engaged evenly. Violette answered every question about operating hours, deliveries, and contract workflow. No commercial clients visited the house. No speakers amplified her work. No equipment operated outdoors. The complaint described a business that did not exist. When the inspector asked for the construction log, she gave him a binder index by date, photograph, material batch, and test result. My name appeared where I had done the work. Hers appeared just as often. He saw the Zenith stamp. You did the downtown symphony hall. My team did. While Violette retrieved a receipt, I added. She laid out the east wall, found the window leak, and caught the refrigerator path. The room would measure worse without her. He wrote it down. She did not hear. Airborne testing measured 30 decibels with the refrigerator cycling and 29 at rest. Then the inspector lifted the tapping machine, put it on the floor. Marcus called from the sidewalk. I opened section 9C. The addendum specifies the primary functional surface for narration, that is, the isolated microphone platform. The risers are part of the permitted assembly. The inspector checked the drawing. The platform is the tested surface. Marcus started toward the steps. I stood in the doorway without touching him. Section 4B authorizes the inspector and permit holder to enter. Not the HOA chair. I'm committee chair. You're still outside. The inspector looked over. Return to the sidewalk or I suspend the inspection for interference. Marcus stepped back. The room went quiet. The machine's steel hammers produced distant, dull taps. The kitchen receiver read 28 decibels, lower than the wind outside. 2 repeat tests returned 28.2 and 27.9. Does it comply? Violette asked. The inspector signed. It exceeds county standards. The permit remains active without limitation. The scratch of his pen was the loudest sound in the kitchen. Violette accepted the yellow compliance form, opened a second binder tab, and handed him the complaint log, recording schedule, false base claims, Marcus's buyer offer, the late test request, and messages promising pressure until the house changed hands. I am filing a bad faith enforcement complaint and requesting a cease and desist, she said. Then she held a prepared form toward Marcus. Withdraw your acoustic complaint and recuse yourself from every vote involving my property, or I ask County Council for emergency review today. Marcus appealed to the inspector. She cannot dictate committee procedure. County ethics rules require recusal where a chair has a financial interest in a forced sale. The inspector said. Her packet supports review. You planned this. Marcus said. I documented it. Violette replied. I stayed silent. This was her decision and her line. Marcus signed the withdrawal, then the recusal. The inspector witnessed both and attached copies to the report. Legal surrender made almost no sound, only paper sliding across the counter. Marcus handed back the pen. You think this changes what people know about you? It changes what you are permitted to do. The inspector closed his case. My report will be filed by noon. At the door, he glanced toward the studio. That room is better than some commercial booths. It had a careful builder, I said, looking at Violette. Marcus remained by the porch steps, staring at the signed forms. You always needed someone to rescue you, he said. Now it's the neighbor. Violette stepped outside. I stayed beside the door, close enough to support her, far enough not to take her scene. I asked why you never dated anyone after me. Marcus said, I thought you were waiting for an apology. She smiled, not the careful smile from the kitchen window, but one that reached her eyes. The one I wanted was already too close. One full beat passed before the oak leaves moved again. Marcus looked from her to me, found no answer that fit, and drove away. Inside, Violette filed the signed forms beneath her contracts. My hands followed their old habit, meters into foam, cables coiled, drills returned to cases. I zipped my tool bag and lifted it. Salem. I stopped inside the studio's absolute zero noise floor. Put the tool bag down. The work is finished. That is the problem. You stay until every measurable danger is gone, then leave before anyone can ask whether you wanted to be here. The strap pressed into my shoulder. I set the bag on the floor. I didn't want loyalty to become pressure. I said, you fought too hard for your choices. I don't want pressure. I want partnership. Violette. It was the first time I had used her name all day. You heard what I was afraid to say, she said. Hear this too. Stop leaving my life the second the emergency ends. I lifted one hand and waited. She closed the distance herself, placed my hand against her upper back, and leaned her forehead against my chest. My other hand rested lightly at her waist, steady, not claiming. The refrigerator compressor started in the kitchen. The isolation pads kept its mechanical hum outside the studio. The sound existed. It simply had somewhere else to go. I can stay, I said. Good. We remained after there was no technical reason to remain. Eventually, she stepped back, but she did not release my hand. What happens to the $800? She asked. Zenith invoices the installed materials exactly as written. Your first contract payment triggers the schedule you chose. And after I pay it, the paperwork closes. She glanced at the tool bag on the floor. Not everything, I hope. No. It was the smallest promise I had ever made, and the first one that did not hide inside a task. 6 months later, the studio held framed cover art, marked scripts, tea tins, and the calibrated meter I had once left without a name. The chair in the corner had become mine often enough that Violet no longer called it the guest chair. A winter afternoon pressed pale light against the window. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen, softened by isolation pads and ordinary distance. Inside, every word remained clean. Nora Peterson appeared on Violet's computer from the publisher's office. Bennett stood beside the desk, reviewing a mentoring pilot Zenith and HarperCollins had agreed to fund for home narrators. The program was Violet's idea. Our firm supplied assessments, the publisher supplied small grants, and every artist kept control of the room and the money. Bennett had become project lead after the theater launch. I had not corrected his first 3 schedules, which the office treated as medical progress. Nora had also closed the other unfinished thread. The original HarperCollins contract had paid on time. Violet repaid the remaining material balance exactly as the agreement allowed, then donated the same amount to the mentoring pilot. The receipt sat framed behind her scripts, not as proof that she owed anyone, but proof that help could arrive with boundaries and end without a hidden claim. Nora raised a contract. 2 years, 6 books, home studio authorization attached. Send it, Violet said. Then she removed a brass key on a blue ring from the desk. She turned to Bennett. Witness this, or he will claim the arrangement lacks documentation. I'm prepared to notarize his emotions, he said. Violet placed the key in my palm. Studio and back door. I added you to the recording calendar, emergency contact sheet, and grocery list. In that order. Nora leaned toward the camera. Should I update our contact record? Yes. Violet closed my fingers around the key. Salem is my acoustic partner. And my partner. Documented. Bennett said. The room filled with an ordinary laugh. Her choice belonged entirely to her. After the call, she recorded one corrected line while I sat beside my closed tool bag. When she removed her headphones, she listened to the engineered quiet. Still too close? I asked. Exactly close enough. The refrigerator began another cycle beyond the sealed wall. Its hum stayed in the kitchen. Her voice stayed in the studio. The brass key stayed warm in my hand. Sound never had to be erased to become safe. It only needed a place where it could belong. The end. Closing thoughts. 1. Core lesson. Real support does not remove another person's choices. It creates clear, honest structure so they can stand on their own feet and still choose to let someone stand beside them. 2. Green flag. Healthy love versus toxic passion. Toxic passion keeps score, creates debt, and calls control protection. Healthy love asks permission, respects boundaries, shares credit, tells the truth about money, and remains present after the crisis is over. 3. Like plus subscribe. Have you ever known someone whose care showed up through consistent actions instead of dramatic promises? Share your story in the comments and like and subscribe for more clean, emotional romance stories.